Let's do this.
Come on, let's do this! Do you want this coffee or not? You're an insult to caffeine! You call yourself a writer? Get up here, get that coffee, get that coffee!
Oh yeah. Feel the burn! Take that out! Fix that there! It's not how you spell definitely! Oh! I'm good. Yeah.
No pain, no gain. After all, pain is just weakness leaving the body. A little discomfort builds character. That's what they say though, right? Hi guys, Amy Sharp here. Welcome to another week of creative writing. Last week, we took a look at the 4 different parts of story: plot, conflict, and saved character and setting for this week. We had an opportunity to get familiar with Freytag's plot pyramid, which dealt with how action proceeds in a story, and we wrapped things up with the hero's journey. Along the way, we discussed internal and external conflict and came to the conclusion that while conflict may get your story going, if we don't have somebody that we actually care about, it's another way that your story may end up falling flat. This week, I'd like to answer the question of whether or not your character needs to change. It's something to consider. Who is your character? Who are you writing about? How much do we get to know them as the audience or the readers? If it's a very brief story, say fairy tale in length, then not a lot of depth is necessary. I might also point to several very well-known characters throughout literary history that they themselves did not go through a lot of change or development. This could be anyone from Sherlock Holmes, James Bond, Nancy Drew. There's actually myriad who show up in serial novels who were so beloved simply because they didn't change. They were dependable. However, the adventures and the action around them were always wonderfully dynamic, with all sorts of secrets and surprises to be discovered. So something for you to think about is, if you do not already have a story planned out with lots of great action, plot, conflict, and dynamics in it, then you may be needing to look into developing your character's depth of personality as well. Alright, so let's get started with a little bit of work on your character. First of all, let's do a mental sketch of them. Who are they really? If you were going to sum your character up into a couple of lines, what would you say about them? Is this someone that you'd go to lunch with? Would you mind introducing them to your family? Your parents? Your sister or brother? Would they be someone that you could go for a drink, a nice cool glass of milk with, after work? Yes? No? Well then, how about this question? Are they content? Yeah, you heard me. It's actually a very important question for your character. Where they are, right now, where your story begins, are they content? Are they satisfied? Are they happy? Do they like their home? Now, home was a concept that we touched very lightly on in our last video. Yeah. Remember, if you're looking at Freytag's plot pyramid, this is introduced in the exposition. If we're looking at the hero's journey, this is the start of the whole entire cycle. This is where our character has their leaping off point. But this is also where we experience our first changes. Home may be nice, but in order to get a story about characters change, they can't just stay there. The question at this point is, if home is so nice, why would anyone leave? Well, depending on the kind of story that you're telling, leaving is not always done from the character's free will. That can introduce some really interesting external and internal conflict along the way. After all, it's one thing to be invited politely on an adventure, beseeched, courted, cajoled, begged with, even. It's quite another to find yourself kidnapped and shoved in a box or a bag, or on the hull of a pirate ship, something like that. Right? Conflict. Now, home, as part of our setting, does have a physical aspect. So, of course, it's a place. It might be a physical location, a house, four walls, a roof over their head, all that. But home also establishes normalcy. Normal is not the same for every character. In fact, a lot of famous characters, we would look at their normal and go, that's not very, well, normal. Normal could be anything from the deck of a sea-washed ship, constantly in pursuit of white whale. Normal could be a dirt farm out on some distant planet. Home could even be a small cupboard under a pair of stairs for others. See, it's all relative. The internal, so the non-physical aspect of the setting of home is that it gives our character a place of comfort, right? Of normalcy, of dependency, something they can say, no matter what, home will be the same today, tomorrow, and more than likely the day after, for better, or sometimes even for worse. Yes, home or normal can be a really bad situation, and sometimes that's excellent for our characters, because then they have reason to leave. But home also gives us something else. It gives us a specific location to contrast our characters' change with. And again, this applies both externally and internally. When external home is some quiet, little bitty home at the end of a cul-de-sac, but locations take us to exotic places, to the far reaches of the galaxy, to strange new worlds or fantastical lands with magical prancing unicorns or mermaids or starships or whatever you want to throw in there. It could be completely different. Then it visually, in our minds, shows us how far they've come. However, it gives us an internal change to track as well. Did our characters start out very meek and mild and quiet? Well then, by the end of it, having left home far behind them, they now come to the exotic sense of bravery, courage, justice, adventure. And that, of course, all fits in very nicely with our hero's journey. The cycle of change. Another important characteristic of home that we need to acknowledge at this point is the stakes it plays in our character's story. See, home, besides just being normalcy, also usually embodies what our characters hold valuable. Right? So as soon as our character begins to leave home, as soon as our character journeys elsewhere, all of that normalcy, all of that comfortable dependency is at risk, right? After all, when you're not there to watch it, life can change pretty quickly. Risk is important to your story because with risk comes value. Seriously, think about this. When something is just given to a human, no strings attached, no hard work, there tends to be a sense of entitlement. Think, after all the youngsters you may have heard warning tales about who never had to work a day in their life. Their parents just gave them a nice new vehicle, and what happened to that shiny red Corvette after a week? Yeah. See, if you didn't have to work for it and it's not something that you value very deeply, then unfortunately you tend to treat it valued very low. But let me ask you this. What if an aspect of your life cost you nearly everything? What if a decision could potentially cost you your health, your family, your other loved ones, life itself? Well, then all of a sudden, that choice or that object becomes priceless. The more something costs for us, the more we tend to value it. Thus, home, an object whose value could constantly be shifting, also has a flexible value. Or, to put it another way, you never realize how dear something is to you until you've lost it, or it's at risk. But don't worry. For stories, this is a good thing. We need stakes. We need risks. I'm not going to try to boil it down to too overly simple of a formula, but let's just say for modern audiences, struggle equals connection. That is, if you want your modern audience to respect your character, your protagonist, as a viable, realistic human being, then you gotta show them struggling. You gotta make them sweat a little bit. Otherwise, you might end up with a Mary Sue. Ah, the Mary Sue. So fabulously perfect, so far from being relatable. Now, the Mary Sue is a term that actually comes out of fan fiction. Well, it's okay. No need to be ashamed. It's still writing. Someone's still getting their stories out there. Mary Sue in fan fiction, I believe she was a crew member aboard the Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise, and of course she was fabulous and brilliant, and both Kirk and Spock fell madly in love with her head over heels, and she just had absolutely no flaws whatsoever. She was so two-dimensional, you could serve her on a paper plate and have a hard time telling the difference, right? She was actually more of a caricature than anything else. A Mary Sue, I think, comes out of the temptation of wanting to make a really incredibly cool character with all sorts of neat powers, maybe laser vision, the ability to read your mind, who's always having incredible adventures that everybody respects or adores, or at least gives lots of nifty things to, but again, in the end, because it's too easy for her, or him, there's not much connection. It's almost a farce of human struggle. And are we really that interested in human struggle? After all, a little bit earlier we said some characters, are very flat and two-dimensional and people still love them. Remember those guys? Well, but even those static characters struggled, right? There are plenty of times where Sherlock Holmes nearly got his bacon fried, where James Bond really got his butt kicked. Even good old Nancy Drew had acid thrown on her one time. True story. Go look it up. So when we're talking about our Mary Sues, as fantastic as they may be, we need to give them some struggle as well. So maybe the fantastic ability to read minds also comes with splitting migraines. Ooh, and a nosebleed. Maybe all of the incredible adventures have also taken a toll on her home life. Her husband is splitting up with her. The humanity. Maybe for all of the incredible things that people want to give her, the government is constantly writing her butt about taxes. Okay, maybe that one's a little bit too mundane, but you see where I'm going with this. That if there are no obstacles in her or his way, if there's nothing that generally puts your character in discomfort or risk, we just have a lot harder time connecting with them. Along with your hero protagonist, there is one other important character you should probably give some good thought to, especially if you want to develop a complex and deep plot. Antagonists! Yeah, 'cause we antagonize you! Oh, don't make that face. We're a necessary evil, you could say. After all, your wussy little hero wouldn't be nearly as cool or impressive if they didn't have an equally impressive rock to push up against. Now, what is? Oh yeah, maybe occasionally there's a few casualties along the way. Oh, life would be so much better if you didn't keep trying to destroy the world. Like you're doing anything with it. But if we didn't throw a couple challenges and obstacles in your protagonist's way, they'd never change. They'd never do anything. And that leads to one sorry story. So next time, before you write your antagonist or your villain off, take pause. Maybe you just need to spend a little bit more time with us, too. Oh yes, I know, you've got your precious little hero who's eventually going to save the day. But maybe if you did spend a little bit more time developing your antagonist as well, you'd find out a lot more about the inner workings of the human heart and mind. After all, not all protagonists have to be good, and certainly not all antagonists are that bad. Alright, so we've had an opportunity to get to know our protagonist a little bit more. But did you realize that you have many more characters to talk about than just your protagonist? Yeah, and your protagonist may not necessarily always be your hero. Sometimes we use those terms interchangeably, but let's take a moment to clear up who and what exactly we're talking about when we discuss protagonist and hero, and of course, antagonist and villain. Protagonist is always going to be the central focus of your story. That's it. That's the only qualification. Hero, on the other hand, traditionally is a person with good intentions, they're noble, and have some self-sacrificing aspect of them. They really do want to save the day. Maybe not in the beginning, but by the end of it, they've reached that cycle of change and become the hero. Looking at it this way, you can hopefully see that a protagonist doesn't necessarily always have to be a very nice or decent person. And by that same token, antagonist is merely an individual who's butting heads with your protagonist. They might not necessarily be a bad person at all, or at least they don't see themselves that way. They just see themselves as another human, or whatever, trying to get their job done. Villain, on the flip side, is going to be a character with nefarious, villainous, or selfish reasons. They are really not looking out for anybody but themselves. So in that aspect, you could have an antagonist who is very righteous and just, maybe someone like Javert from Les Miserables, but then you get someone who's very scheming and crafty. Lex Luthor pops to mind, who, I think he came to terms with his own villainy long ago. He may feel that it's justified villainy, but he knows he's doing bad things. So we have protagonist and hero, and antagonist and villain, but there is one more that I would like to address really quickly, and that's the foil. What is a foil, you might ask? Well, it's actually handier than just wrapping your potatoes or storing away leftovers. The foil are any other characters who show up in your character's story who have a long-running relationship with them. They actually do kind of act like foil in that they help reflect depths and nuances of your character that we might not have seen otherwise because it's internalized or something that your character wouldn't normally say or do without that exterior influence. Foils can also be very helpful in building sympathy for your protagonist. Unfortunately, I've also seen this angle of foil used to garner sympathy for your protagonist in some not so straightforward ways. In particular, something that I call black flagging, or death flags. It comes from a gaming term, but it completely applies to stories and movies as well. A death flag or a black flag is any time a character does or says something specific that clues you as the audience their time in that story is very, very short. Alright, so black flags I have noticed in stories in the past. First and foremost, sudden foil development out of nowhere. Yes, you've gone for the majority of the story, they've been maybe the clever, witty, compassionate sidekick, haven't gotten that much time devoted to their backstory or their worries and needs, and all of a sudden, in like the last 20 minutes, they get depth, they get emotion, they have needs, dadgummit, they want something, which means they're toast. So beware sudden development out of left field. Marriage proposals. This is where they're really trying to get you in the feels. They're ready to pop the big question. darn, if it only didn't have to be right before that mortal fight, right before that war, right before that one death-defying event that will probably cost them their life. And does. A side character develops a integral piece of information or some evil and nefarious plot. Yeah, this one does help heighten the suspense when you think, oh no, they just need to make it back to the hero in time and pass on this critical piece of information. Which is exactly why they're not. If you're not the hero, don't go discovering stuff. Enjoying the home life a little bit too much. Yeah, as soon as you see characters starting to revel in how lovely it is, once they make that fatal wish that if only days like this could last forever, they won't. Kids. Anytime kids enter the picture, again, especially if it's a side character, little harbingers of death. So anytime you see a character who pulls out a photo, who carries photos anyway today? On my phone. Anyways, anytime you see a character pull out a photo or start talking about how they're finally gonna make it to little Jimmy or little Susie's birthday, how they're finally gonna make amends and go to the theme park with their dearly beloved childrens, sorry, that date's not gonna happen. And of course, there is the infamous, almost always occurring in every horror movie, I'll be right back. So those are just a couple of my favorite, which I have found to be a little bit heavy-handed throughout stories, movies, etc. Not bad if played in the right circumstances, they can't be effective, but when you see it coming, it kind of cheapens the experience. So that leads us to another question. Kidding aside this time. In a world where, quite frankly, due to social media, maybe even just media in general, suffering is so visible, where everybody can post about their bad day or what they're going through, how do you make sure that your audience really genuinely connects with your character? Well, the answer to that is the same as any meaningful relationship. Time. Your audience has to be able to spend time with your character. See them at their best, but of course, maybe even more importantly, they see them at their worst. Alright, well, on the topic of side characters, let me give you a few more that we're going to spend some time knowing a little bit better next time. These are your story archetypes. Now, archetypes come from a disciple of Sigmund Freud, named Carl Jung, who, along with kind of deciding that there were certain tropes that kept showing up in, to him, every observable culture and all of their stories, to him there were also set patterns of character behavior that showed up in almost all these stories. The archetypes, along with including the hero, also include the ally, the mentor, the herald, remember, herald to adventure, the threshold guardian, the changeling, the trickster, and the shadow. Alright, so for today, we had an opportunity to look at setting, particularly home, the importance of that physical place, but also the mental and emotional benefit that home gives to our character in the story. We addressed the importance of having stakes set up for your character. They need something at risk, because the risk creates struggle, and of course struggle creates, that's right, connection with your audience. And we want genuine connection for our characters, so try not to lean too much on quick and easy tactics from the past. They're not bad as far as a springboard goes, but if you're trying to build genuine connection and depth for your character, then you need to think of them like a genuine person. It may be really hard to bring yourself to do what seems like mean or evil things to them, but remember, in the long run, this is all proving that they will rise to the challenge, that they will become the protagonist or the hero that your readers want to see. We also had an opportunity to look at other character types. So besides protagonist and antagonist, we also have a foil. And besides our hero, when we look at archetypes, we also have the ally, the mentor, the herald, the guardian, the changeling, the trickster, and the shadow. Alright, that went by really quickly today, but don't worry, we have more than enough to do next time. We're actually going to combine our two halves and see what happens when at last we have our fully conflict-charged action with our realized, deep, and relatable character. Hopefully, it'll be a good story. See you next time. Alright. Here we go.
I check the headlines and decide that I am bored. I check my email and I decide to answer later. Another cup of coffee and I drag myself to work. My life is grounded in a firm routine of coffee, sleep, and work. I am not boring, I just stick to what I know. I'm sitting there at work and I realized I forgot to wake up. I can't be productive when I'm dreaming about a sheep. I go upstairs and
Looks
get
like for our
myself
protagonist,
another cup
then
of
we won't really get a
coffee.
sense
I
of
get
change.
downstairs and then I spill it on the
We
floor.
won't really get a sense of change.
Well, my life
Along
is
with your hero
grounded in
protagonist,
a firm
there is someone
routine of
else who I
coffee,
believe
sleep,
with
and
just as
work.
much
I
attention.
am not boring, I just stick to what I know.
Oh. That got a little bit weird, but I don't know. Is this a suitable creepy vibe? Are we getting creepy vibe? Creepy, 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 creepy. You have no idea what this does to me.
My baby on the treetop. Lunch hour's over and I can't stay up. I've got to drink coffee, but that's a mistake. I best switch to decaf or I'll stay awake. My life is grounded in a firm routine of coffee, sleep, and work. I am not boring, I just stick to what I know. Oh, I am not boring, I just stick to what I know. I am not boring, I just stick to what I know. I stick to what I know. I stick to what
Apple juice. So much better than